There we go. Welcome, everybody. I'm Clint,
I'm Diana.
and this is the Swatches Art live stream. We are having an art challenge today. We've already looked at the sketches 2 weeks ago. So they've had 2 weeks in order to work on their concepts after the feedback and send it in. And we're going to be taking a look at the finals today. This is a live stream, so I'm just going to take a moment to double check my settings, make sure I'm not dropping frames or anything. And if you're joining in live, go ahead and just let me know if my audio levels sound okay, whether it's a little quiet, a little loud, whatever. And then we will go ahead and jump into the reviews. Janine, welcome. Christina.
Yeah, I got your message, Elijah. We'll leave you to the end.
Yeah. Okay, so if you happen to come across this video and you don't know who we are or what this is about, we're both professional illustrators. We do mainly illustration, some concept art as well, and we have a education art academy, Swatches Academy, and we're just putting on this art challenge. It's a public challenge, and it's just a chance for artists to get in here, work from a brief that has a simple outline to it, get some feedback, and just push themselves with their artistic skills a little bit. So overall, the people have had a month to work on their pieces. Most of the people in the challenge are working adults, so they're trying to do this stuff on their nights and weekends. And I'm going to just take a look at what they've got. Hopefully we can give them...
Also, several of them are former students
Yes.
or current students.
We'll try to give them some feedback about maybe how to improve the piece a little bit, and then whatever topics their images happen to bring up that just make good art discussion. Go over that sort of thing as well. And this is the topic that we're going over, the clues of Cluthulhu. This is our fictional whodunit board game. And in this, the artists are trying to depict little scenes, prop scenes, that would be random clues that could be found potentially throughout the mansion location in the game. And we went ahead and wrote up the options. So here you can see the list that the artist had to choose from. You can choose any of these.
Those are on our Discord as well.
Yep.
For anyone that wants to go look at them. And though the challenge is, I guess, going to be over today, or is technically over, you can still use these and any other
the previous
briefs that Clint has written up. They're, I think, all available on the Swatches Discord, so you can go back, and there's like so many. If you don't know what to draw and you need an idea or a prompt, there's some really good briefs in there that you can just download for free and use.
Now, we've ran about 50 of these over the last several years, so whatever your interest is, a lot of fantasy stuff. This is one of the fewer prop-based challenges we've done. But, all right, looks like people have had a chance, a couple of minutes to come in here and join, so let's go ahead and start opening some pieces. Nino joined us last time, but he is quite busy right now. He's got a lot of commissions. So he won't be joining us today. Hopefully we'll get him back again at some point. So let's take a look at finals. All right, we'll just start with Brody. Now some of these I have done a little paint over of because they were sent in early enough, and I got a little paint over to illustrate a couple of ideas, but not all of them, so apologies on that. Okay, so first up, they were going with the dagger clue. In this one, the artist is depicting a serpentine-bladed dagger that was stashed away into some kind of drawer, and there was blood on the blade. And everything else is really up to them. What exactly the design of the dagger is, what is in the drawer, what the lighting is, what the colors are, that's all up to them. So right off the bat, what I'm liking is that the image is just abundantly clear. Okay, it's not fuzzy, it's not grainy. Obviously, the dagger is the focal point of this image. So the main mark that needs to be marked off, check, is checked. I do like that. So at this point, I think it starts getting down into design or rendering is kind of what I'm seeing is if you were to push the image more, how are you kind of seeing that?
I just want to praise um, the choices made in the image in regards to what else you put in the image. So showing kind of a crop of the drawer and not showing like the whole drawer. You know, you just got in real close.
Mm-hmm.
It looks kind of mysterious with just that little, you know, strip of light coming across. You know, it's a nice idea. I like that the other objects in there are really bland and boring,
Mm-hmm.
so they don't draw attention away from the dagger, which is the, you know, main clue, the main focus. So
Yep.
the other things are pretty innocuous and, you know, exactly what we mentioned last time. So the paper clips, the crumpled
Mm-hmm.
paper, the loose change. This is great. The book is there, but it's not a particularly exciting book. That's good.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think those were really, really good choices.
Mm-hmm. So if you were to make some adjustments here, or if you were, say, an art director and you're working with Brody in order to improve this a little bit, what are some things that you might point out?
Well, there are a couple of things that jump out at me, um, and that would be the first thing that jumps out at me is kind of the very parallel placement of several things, like
Mm-hmm.
the drawer, the book, and the dagger are all kind of perfectly aligned with each other. The dagger's slightly off from the book, but I think it's still a little bit close. Um, and that's one thing. The second thing I could mention is the shadows, right? The shadow on the book, the shadow under the
Mm-hmm.
blade, they're not really consistent with each other. So the shadow on the blade is coming from directly kind of above, right? It's projected directly underneath, but the shadow of the book is not doing the same thing. It's kind of going off to the side, so it looks like different lights,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which I don't think was intentional. Um, that's one thing, and um, the placement of the blood, I don't mind so much. I mean, I think the fact that it's just perfectly aligned with the shadow is a little awkward. That's like another thing that makes it awkward. But if we were to kind of separate the two,
Mm-hmm.
it might not be a problem. There is a bit of a tangent here. Am I being really picky? It's really minor things that you could easily change if you
Yeah.
wanted to do that.
Well, we want to note here that the things that we're talking about with this piece is that there is very little foundational drawing and rendering issues here. So the book is drawn well, the dagger is drawn well, like the elements are drawn well and put in the scene well.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're talking about, okay, how do you augment it a little bit? All right, now we're talking about just twisting angles to get a little more out of the angle, tweaking the light patterns in order for them to be a little more consistent or interesting. Right, so that's kind of the point that we're at now with that.
Yeah, overall, like just as is very successful, right? So I'm not saying that there's anything horribly wrong with it. These are just minor things.
Yeah. Okay, I did a couple of things here. I don't remember exactly what I did, but I did a couple of things. I agree that there's maybe an excess of blood dropped through here right underneath the shadow area. I think you could probably back that off a little bit because it's almost at a glance registering as its own shape or its own item. So I'd pull back from that a little bit and I did that here. I also feel like you could add a few more pages. It's like one single sheet of paper underneath there. If it was me, I would add a couple more and maybe wrinkle up the edges of them a little bit just to give it a little roughness. The gold is getting maybe a little bright. You're just going 100% white with that. You can do that with a silver. I think it works a little better on silver. But one of the factors of gold is that it actually doesn't like to get to white. That it often will just highlight right up to really bright, warm yellow. And that's sort of its highlight. Otherwise, it usually sets slightly darker than what you think. Yeah. So that would be, a small thing that you could do there. And possibly pushing down the amount of detail in the coins. They're pretty detail heavy for their small area. And it's actually more detail in that small area than most of the other items have. So we could just drop them down slightly. Yep. And I love adding worn edges on books. So if it was me personally, I would add more worn edges. Okay. It's also getting slightly dull. I think we could just punch up the saturation and color a little bit, just for presentation purposes. And it's getting a bit red, so maybe just balance that out slightly. But really minor stuff here. I think this is quite successful. Yeah. So we appreciate you joining in, Brody. And we don't know exactly when the next art challenge will be, but we will keep doing them from time to time. So hopefully we'll see you again. Okay. Next up, we have He also did the serpentine dagger. Okay. I had some paint over on that one as well. All right. Again, nice and clear. No mucking around with what the focus of this image is. It's obviously the dagger. Let me reposition a little bit so you guys can see it better. There we go. Going with a shinier opalescent handle.
That's kind of fun.
Yeah, that's a nice effect right there. I like that. The book is a nice way to prop the dagger up, but it's not so busy that it's like stealing my attention because it's all like browns and stuff. So from here, I feel like the rendering is pretty good, but it could have another pass. Particularly a couple of things that I would look at is the wood feels like it could have another pass. I do a little repaint. I'll show you what that looks like. But we're getting just a little ambiguous how some of the perspective angles are working on this. So I try to tighten up the perspective there a little bit. And this is another one where we're having that cast shadow is sort of getting off on us. Now I'm going to go ahead and step through this for just a second for you as well as anybody else watching. But the light is basically coming from just to the right of the dagger because we have the shadow on the left side. But it's almost straight down because it's just kind of doing this. However, the problem is that the shadow is like pulling off to the side like that. So what we can do is say, all right, the shadow is here. I can follow that down. And then it has to connect up with the sides of this. Now, we understand that rolls around to the other side, so we can get to about there. Now, I'll just draw. So those have to connect up something more like that with the shadow. And that would be the cast. And then you can figure out what your angle is. I think maybe that's a little severe of an angle. So, because if it's coming in at that strong of an angle, then the side of the book would actually be more lit than the top would. So I'm going to assume that this lighting is more correct from the book, which means that we're going to have a more drop down view of the shape there. And we're going to just basically mimic that same contour down on the table. So that's how I would approach looking at that. And that would just help it be overall a little more accurate, a little more harmonious with the way that the lighting's set up. I do want to say that the leather is coming across quite well. So what's your observations?
No, I agree. I mean, this is just, okay, I'll say one thing. I feel like it's a little bit kind of pickiness. It's just something that I have in my mind when I'm working on a piece. Kind of mentioned it with the other piece, which is the placement of kind of the wood grain, like which direction it's going in. And I know that sometimes people can use that to point towards a focal point, right? But in this case, it's not pointing towards a focal point. All these lines are kind of pointing into the infinite, beyond. So in that case, I would try to position them maybe more going this way, trying to make them not parallel with the book or with the dagger, maybe split the difference, just so, or maybe coming down this way, just so that they don't line up perfectly on, they don't create kind of a visual grid almost. So that's one thing. Another thing is what you mentioned, really just giving probably the blade another pass on the materials. Yeah.
Now, overall, you have a Dutch angle to this scene. The whole thing is tilted over a little bit. That's a cinematography term, meaning that the camera is not straight. It's tilted over a little bit. In this case, it's tilted over that way a little bit, because we can see that with the book tilt. And we just would have to keep that in mind when you're doing the table as well, that it has to follow that same perspective. So I did like a rework, just trying to simplify that wood a little bit. It has a little too much contrast with the darks. I think if you tone that down, get the darks mainly for the cracks, lighten it up a little bit along the crack, we'll have a simpler wood that reads a little bit better. And then, yeah, just a little color layer over the gold. So I agree, like, you could give another pass to the blade. I didn't look at any references. I just kind of threw some tones on there. But yeah, like maybe some little reflection kind of lines coming off the sides of the blades. Edges would be nice. Give it a little more detail, or like showing a little more value change along that thinner serrated edge over there. Again, this is another gold that's getting like 100% saturated. But what you can do is like tone down. I just toned it down. It's not finished. But then put the most saturated area right in the highlight. The rest of it you can keep down just slightly. Only other thing, just to meet the brief, I feel like you could put a little more blood on the blade.
That's true.
Yeah, it's missing that a little bit.
Yeah, that is, well, there is just a little bit, but it's kind of unclear.
Yeah, at a glance, I'm not sure if it's completely visible. And I would expect that if it was used, it'd probably up towards the end.
But no. If I used on someone, there'd probably be a little bit more blood on it.
Yeah.
I would imagine.
All right, thank you. Hopefully that was helpful for you.
That was really good, me.
All right. Let's see. Let's go in particular order here. Janine, let's take a look at yours.
Oh, it's not opening.
Hang on.
We've got an issue. Sorry, guys.
Nope, my Finder window just locked up. Okay.
Are any of them opening? Okay.
There we go. Just needed a chance. Okay. So I just need to move a window around for a second.
We've got a lot of windows open on that
My other monitor is completely full. Okay, Janine. All right, we have these, well, let's say, Cyclopsian skull ring, which is what we asked for. Design is very clear, exactly fulfills the object that was being requested. And the rendering is clean. So all of those are excellent marks. So moving forwards with this one, if we were to give another pass to it to improve it, there are a couple of things that we could look at doing. First up, it's just the choice of angle. There's some things that work really well in a straightforward view. And in a lot of scenes, you actually want to use a straightforward view, particularly if it's like a complex scene, because it makes it very visibly understandable. And I've done it with my own pieces numerous times. It just helps simplify what you're looking at. For this one, I feel like it would be best shown off in maybe a 3/4 or turned view slightly. I would require more complex drawing and three-dimensional blocking out to figure out where the middles of the things are in a turn. But I feel like the references are out there if you were looking for a skull ring reference. It may not be exactly what you're aiming for design-wise, but probably get you close enough. So that is generally going to be a more going to ultimately get you a better result, a more interesting result, is to have an angled prop like this. But using a prop from this angle, okay, let's say we go with this. What are other things we're looking at? You mentioned something to me when we first opened it earlier. What was that?
Oh, the wood grain?
Yeah.
I'm just, this is like, I have a one-track mind with the wood grain, but with the tables, like, I just want to mention this to everyone watching that's interested in kind of composition, is even the wood grain of a table or the tablecloth or whatever is under the object is something that you need to compose in the way that most favors your focal point, right? And in this case, similar to some others, you have the wood grain kind of following the object, right? Mm-hmm. And some others it was parallel with the object. This one is still parallel. It's going around the ring, and it looks a little unnatural that the table would do that exactly where the ring was placed, right? So that's, you know, if you have these things hopefully on separate layers, that's kind of an easy fix to do. You can just get under there and just move your wood grain slightly to the side, and that will take care of the problem, right?
Yeah. The next thing is looking at the lighting setup and having a little more intentionality with the lighting setup. And it always goes in stages of like making sure that your drawing is right first. And you've done that, right? You've determined the design, you've established the drawing. Then the next step is like, okay, well, how do I light it to show it off well and make it as understandable and interesting as possible? And that's where we're getting a little simple. I can make it out with the lighting that you have, but if we were to light it maybe a little more three-dimensionally, then we could get a different form out of it. So I get a repaint to it, and I adjusted a couple of things because I first want to note you what I'm seeing, which is it's not clear whether it's being lit more from the front, kind of the camera view, or maybe from the top, because I have a lot of top light here, but I actually have this side lit more than the top there. So we're playing with like a little ambiguous of the lighting. So if we give it a repaint, we get something like that. And this is where we just said, all right, we're going to just say, let's pick the top light.
We're just going to commit to a direction. So if the light's coming from the top, okay, that means all the top planes of the objects in the scene are lit from the top, right? And that makes it easy for you. You just give the same value to the top planes of your object that's lighter than the side plane or the non-top planes, right?
All right, so all the top planes a little bit lighter, all the side planes a little bit darker. And I would keep that front light, but I turn it into what you would consider a fill light. It's just there to bring a little form information out of the shadows. So again, this area could remain a little bit lighter in comparison to the corner areas on either side, in the same way that this could get darker here, but perhaps the inside and the middles stay a little bit brighter overall in tone. That is going to help. And then also watching the drop, the cast shadow. This would have to be raising off of the table a little bit because the skull is supporting it in an upwards direction. And that would mean that the shadow has to fall underneath it somewhere. Now, I just eyeballed it depending kind of where we're picking the light to be.
It's not major changes. And I'm sorry for that painting out of your runes. That was obviously you'd have to put the runes back where they are. It was not on purpose to paint out the magical heart.
No, those were good. Those should be there. Fine. This was just a fast paint over to illustrate the points. So they would need to be reestablished. Okay. So that's our thoughts here. I think you did good and very understandable. Like the design.
Very on brief.
Yes.
Yeah. You did a good job.
All right. Appreciate it, Janine.
Everybody did a good job, actually.
Okay.
We're just marking up. You can't see it on the other monitor, but we're marking off the ones we already looked at so we don't get confused. And we'll open up a new one.
Okay, well, let's take a look at Christina.
I think Christina might be here. I'm not 100%.
Yeah, if you guys are here, if we're reviewing your art during this and you are here, feel free to, ask a question or whatever in the chat up here.
Janine wrote something in the box there.
Shadows were bothering you? Yeah. Well, hopefully that helps someone figuring those out. And don't be afraid to go look at references. There's a lot of ring references out there. You just go out to Pinterest or whatever, and you could even go out to Sketchfab. There's 3D models of skull type rings. Again, you'll have to adapt it some, but they might be able to give you a little of that form information that you might need.
Yeah, Christina is here. She typed
Christina?
something earlier. Yeah, there's
All right, no particular questions though. All right, well, we'll just hit you with general feedback here. I say that the wood is looking good. I don't think you really need to do much there. It kind of does what it needs to do, which is it just has a little set dressing.
I really like your design, honestly. Yeah. I think it's really nice and charming, and the vial looks nice, and yeah, I like it.
So here, my view is that the thing that would make the biggest difference here in elevating the quality of the image would be to, again, look at the lighting direction and really commit to a specific direction to it. What I mean is that if we look at this, we're looking at all the most lit planes. And for the top, it's like, okay, well, we got a lot of strong top light here, but we have a shadow on the side. Over here, we've got lit from the right side, but shadow on the other side. Actually, the other way. Lit here, but shadow there. Over here, it's kind of just from the front. We just have light from the front here, but from the top there. But then we get down here, and it's a bit of everything. That the tops are actually shadowed, which means that this lighting would be more accurate. That you have the shadow, the cast shadows are going upwards.
Because they're, well, the implication is it's being lit from underneath.
Yeah, there's a light down here somewhere casting that shadow. Because the cast shadows are going that direction, I'll go ahead and just consider that like the proper direction. And did a little paint over, just trying to unify it to that specific direction. That alone is going to give a feeling of believability that the mixed lighting doesn't give.
That's a good point from Matthew. The cast shadows on the other items in the scene are not consistent. That's a good catch. I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, those cast shadows need to go up as well.
Yeah, you are correct.
The other thing is we could probably go a little more subtle with the glass. It immediately reads as glass, but I think we go maybe a little more subtle. So here, okay. So this is using a similar direction where we're mainly looking at either the left side, well, it's the left and bottom sides of the elements that are getting the most light. All right, and then the top and right sides are getting the most shadow. And just toning down a little bit of how bright that glass is getting. And because the light is coming from underneath, actually the top plane of the liquid would be darker than that side plane. All right, so same sort of form lighting applies
like
to that as well.
Cylinder in there.
Yeah. Okay. I agree. The design is on track. Of the key itself feels interesting. Feels like it would fit within the kind of the world.
It's recognizable as a key. Like it's obvious what it's supposed to be. It's a key. You got the vial in there. Like it was really well executed.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other thoughts you have here?
No, that's about it for me.
All right, Christina, good work. And if anybody decides to put edits to their image, hey, post out the final on the Swatches Discord. There is a room for, I think it's called before and afters, of your initial sketch that you do for the challenge, and then the final after the feedback.
Well, you
So,
could also just put it in the Challenger space.
Mhm.
People, that one's been pretty active.
yeah. All right, we looked at Christina. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at Nicholas. Yeah. Okay, now Nicholas, I note on here that it actually says final whip for a work in progress. I'm assuming that's indicating that it's not actually done. So I'll keep that in mind as we're kind of talking about it here.
Yeah.
Right. The subject matter registers, it's the pistol. For anybody that didn't read the description, what we're looking for is a pistol that was found outside in the mud. All right. And that was about the base of the description there. So here, all right, I'm going to say that it's a mixed result for me on this one.
Well, first I will say that it does read as what it's supposed to
Yes.
be. Like, your lines are clean, which is really good on a weapon, right? To have the clean perspective, clean lines, clean form rendering. Like, it's a complicated design on the pistol, but it still reads as a pistol. So, you know, I got to give you props for that for sure. To start off with, and it is at a good angle, a good position, has a good read. It's clearly separated from the background, so I got to praise you, you know, for those aspects of it.
I'm going to be a little more straight with you because we've had class together. We've already chatted before. So on this one, I feel like you are letting your creativity go a little too far here with the changing up of the gun design. And it's starting to kind of overwhelm what the context of the image is really about. So the context is it's just a pistol that was found partly submerged in the mud. But now it's less about the clue of the pistol being found, that now it's this golden, you know, tentacle designed pistol. And the design is kind of becoming more important than the clue itself. That's one of the things that we had noted last time, was that just a regular pistol is fine. And
well, the regular pistol, I think, would have emphasized the narrative a little bit better. Like, it's a weapon that was found in the ground, someone was using it or was shot with it, and it's, you know, been abandoned. It's, you know, like an abandoned murder weapon that's been found. This is becoming more of like a mystical special object. It's less about what's been done with the pistol and more about the pistol itself. So it's kind of slightly, I guess, altering the meaning of the original brief.
Yeah, that's where we're a little split on it, because the render is not bad. So I'm not knocking that. I'm knocking that it starts to shift the tone and what the focus of the image is about. And that's where we almost have to answer some things like this in two directions, which is, as a personal piece, you just look at it for whatever you want it to be. If you're approaching this more like if it was a professional piece for a project or a client, then you have to then start asking questions like, well, does it match the project's needs rather than my creative vision? You know, does it match the client's vision of what this needs to be? And that's kind of higher level conversation and more of like a professional conversation. But it does bring up that point, and so we'll go ahead and mention it. Overall, though, if you want to keep it exactly the way it is and you just want to finish rendering it for yourself, I would suggest toning it down. The gun itself, we're getting very high value gold. Gold actually has a lower base value than what you're working with right now. So I would drop that down some. unless you're going with like a white gold, which I'm not really going to suggest, but even if you're going to go with like a brass, that's going to be distinctly lower in value as well. And I would also suggest letting part of the gun sink lower in the mud. It's just cleanly resting right on top right now. And some of your earlier sketches, it was clear like half of the handle was down in the mud, and I think that had more overall interesting kind of positioning. So.
Yeah, maybe just some little reflections if there's like any water or wet little pools in here, or just some blades of grass maybe around it in the mud might add a little bit more dimension if you wanted to enrich the scene a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's nothing major.
Okay. Design wise, I am not a gun expert, but I do think through design just from a logical standpoint. And if the bullets are going here, that's not a big enough hole. There'll need to be a bigger hole there. And I don't think you're going to have the dip in the location where the bullet is. You're going to have the dip in the area between the bullets, because that's where you can carve out an area without taking up the room where the bullets are. So watch where you have the grooves there. Okay. Right, well, a variety of different things to think about there. Thank you for sending it in. The rendering, like Diana said, is nice and clean. I love seeing that. And you can keep it, kind of chunky with the shapes, or you can give it more passes and do it more realistic. Yeah. All right, let's take a look at perhaps Zach. Yeah. All right, so for this, Zach is doing the pendant. Now, the pendant was supposed to be fairly ornate. It is opened.
I really like this piece. I think it's super fun.
On the inside of the top is a depiction of a kind of a scraggly old bearded guy. And on the other side is a human tooth, canine tooth. So
Zach is here. Hi, Zach.
Hey, Zach. If you got any comments, questions, just toss them in there. I've got a question. May I ask how to appreciate arts on a daily basis? Okay, I'll come back and take a look at some questions after we finish looking at the artwork, and we'll have just a little Q&A, general open Q&A time at the end. Okay, so here, Zach, this is successful. Yeah, it does everything that it really needs to do. So I think that works well.
The portrait is really funny. It's very entertaining. That's good. I mean, that would be, the part of the goal too to one of these illustrations is to make it fun for the audience, right? And that's, if you pull the card from a game deck and you saw this guy's funny face, that would be really funny and charming, right? I like it.
Okay. Value-wise, I think you could get the fabric a little brighter with a little more contrast between the light and shadow. It's sort of just getting a little too dark overall for me. It's Photoshop. That's a 30-second change, so you can do that. Otherwise, the locket itself is registering maybe not as metallic as it could. It's feeling a little flat for me. So if it was me, that's something that I would push to try to get a little more gleam out of the gold.
It's a bit dull.
Yeah. And potentially making the photo feel a little more faded. We're getting really crisp and kind of high contrast in the photo. And that's something visual I think I would just soften a little bit. Other thoughts?
No, I concur.
Okay, so I did a couple of these things. First, I just tried to tone down how saturated it was. Sometimes gold has a tendency to shift a little more into the yellow and not so warm. So I was playing around with that idea. and deepening it because gold has a lower base value than what you want. And what you want is like a bigger jump between the midtones and the highlights in most cases to get the right sense of the gleam. And so here we get kind of that shine from the gold, and for some reason I've got a big brush stroke up there. That was a mistake. So you can kind of see how this goes from feeling a little matte, like something painted with gold paint. I've seen that before, versus something that feels actually a little more gold. All right. And that's getting that higher pop of highlights around some of those. And that's just fading that photo out a little bit with a low opacity gray. And that just allows it to set back like an old photo would. And yeah, I think that's good. And then I didn't change anything with the fabric, but that would be a small value change to make on it. No thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's great.
No. Good work, man.
It would have been easy to overdo that, but you really focused on the right things.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we are doing Elijah last. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at Marion. If I'm not mistaken, I think Marion is here.
Marion is here.
All right. Hey, Marion, let us know if you have any questions or comments about your piece here. So Marion is doing the skull ring as well, but she went with a avian skull, some sort of bird skull as the premise of her design, and the large green gem there. I'm going to pull in a little bit so everybody can appreciate some of the nice rendering here.
Mm-hmm.
Marion, I particularly like the way that you imply a lot of the material, particularly in the crystal and in this kind of iron.
Yeah, the crystal's really well executed. Like, that's another thing that's really easy to overdo.
Yep. It doesn't feel over-rendered.
No.
Yep. And the wood around here as well, you're suggesting a lot of detail without really going into doing a lot of detail. And that's nice. So, I think I made the ring way too big, but otherwise I wasn't sure how to show the window too. No, it feels good because we're accepting this as our scale reference, so we don't really know how big anything else is in comparison to it. Yeah.
It's not that important to focus too much on the window. There's a suggestion of it there. That's enough.
Yeah. All right. So, what are you thinking about the piece? What would you suggest? Any changes?
I'm not sure, actually.
Well, Marion, I want to say that you really paid attention to what you needed to here. It's really well executed to the point where it's very minor stuff that you would do at this point to actually...
being really picky, right?
I made a couple of little changes, but this is where we're getting picky. You're getting up to a fairly high level of render with this. I'm not talking about like overly detailed. I'm just talking about your balancing your scene and your execution very well. So I made a couple of things, but let me talk you through what some of these are.
Oh, Olivia is here too. Hi, Olivia.
Hey, Olivia. What I'm looking at is the values. When I pull back on the scene, some of the values are sort of running together. For me, a lot of this area is kind of just clumping together value-wise. So I'm not getting clear separation between the wood and the ring. And the same thing over here, this cast shadow and the shadow side of that is sort of grouping together as well.
Maybe pushing the shadow back there would work.
So that's what I looked at changing. I made a couple of those edits. All right. That is allowing some more light to hit this opposite half of the curve of the ring. And that way that it can pop out a little brighter against the darker wood. And then adding a little more brighter wood here and here for that to contrast against down there. Now, you were in the class with us. We were talking about value pairs. And that's the same thing that's going on here. We're talking about the value pairs, but on a very small scale. All right. And over here, just bringing up how not letting the shadow get as dark, raising the level of the shadow slightly, and letting the edge of that be a little darker. And that way they don't have quite the same value range, and they can register separate slightly. Very small stuff. I think that's about all you really need to wrap this up. And let me just double check unless you had a question in here. Nitpick as much as you want. Yeah, that's small stuff. I think I like it. The gemstone reads really well. Mm-hmm. Now, everyone else, if you've not tried gemstones, Marion is using a basic principle here that works really well, which is overall, you get the lighter part on the inside on the opposite side of the highlight. So the highlight, the facet, or the angle that is getting the highlight can be really, really bright. It's like a specular highlight. And then the light is going through the volume to hit the other side, the inside of the crystal, and it kind of pulls on the other side, making it brighter. And so for the side that is actually towards the light, most of it is actually darker, except for that one highlight, which is brighter.
Well, you can use the same arrangement on like potions, magical liquids.
Yes. Yeah. Good stuff, Marion. Thanks for jumping in the challenge. Okay, we have, let's take a look at Raphael. Yeah. Hey, Raphael, you here? I don't know. I didn't notice your name come up.
I don't know if he's here.
If not, we'll just, check this out in the recording. Okay, so for this one, what Raphael is doing is depicting a ominous letter that was partly burned that is found within the fireplace. And we looked at your concept last week, kind of picked out one about not showing the whole fireplace, just showing kind of the, I don't know what you call it, the basin. Mm-hmm. Yeah, where the logs and ash actually are. And I think this works so much better than the whole scene. I just also like the way that you've separated the whole scene out by just cropping the bricks in a three-dimensional pattern. That works really well. Let me pull up for you guys and appreciate some of the rendering Raphael's putting in here. So you got the wax seal here with the symbol on it. A variety of papers have kind of spilled out and partly burned, and they've got all kinds of little symbols on them as well. Also another one where you could have just really over-rendered the heck out of this, but you didn't. And I think that's a good call because it doesn't really need it. So you were suggesting ash and wood and all that stuff, and it works. You immediately know what you're looking at. You don't really need more rendering to tell you that. Okay. All right. Any observations off the bat?
Well, I think you did a really good job. I think we're kind of running into just a slight readability issue when you zoom out a little, where there's just a lot of little shapes in this area. Mm-hmm. Maybe if it was mine, I would perhaps simplify it a little bit more. Mm-hmm. But maybe some of the upward-facing planes could be just a little bit lighter, but nothing major. Yeah. Like I don't have any major critiques for it.
Mm-hmm. This one, I agree. No major changes here. It does what it needs to do. I am going to suggest a few little value changes similar to what we looked at on Marion's, which is just trying to separate out a few elements with the values. In particular, we're totally losing this back edge, and that is because a lot of these bricks are basically the same value and almost the exact same color as the iron basin itself. So if we were to just shift those bricks in particular like a little a little lighter, a little more color.
It's got to be one or the other,
Yeah.
either the basin or the bricks. Right?
The other thing is when you are depicting the, well, in any scene really, when you're depicting written text and symbols and stuff on a page, you usually want to make all of that script about half the opacity as you normally would. All right, so if it's normally a black letter printed on a page, you only show that at 50% in the image. Otherwise, it becomes so tight with detail and so sharp, it's a little distracting. So that's something else that I would just glaze over all of the script at about 50% of the page color, just to tone them down a little bit. That's what I have on this one. So it's still there. You can read that there is script there, but hopefully it kind of simplifies the same thing that you were talking about, which is it's just getting a little too busy. And then this is not a clean paint over, right? This is very messy and quick. But if we were to push the bricks somewhere in that territory, then you can immediately see the shape of the basin kind of pulling out from that. And that's perhaps a little more effective.
Yeah, there are several solutions to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Basically, it would just be separating the bricks up for the basin, either making the basin kind of a lighter, not light, but a lighter gray than it is before, or like something like this.
Yeah, you can use that same tone. Just make sure it's like one value lighter than
on the top
basin.
planes, or then like what Clint did, you can change the value, the color of the bricks and separate it that way. So again, it's very similar to, because Raphael was in our class before, it's very similar to what we covered in class about kind of trying to separate things that are bleeding together too much by the value pairs, right, between the edges.
Otherwise, I do want to commend the burnt effect that you're getting here. It does look the way that paper burns in that particular pattern with the black edges, and you got the little hot marks here or there.
It looks
That's
crispy.
a nice effect. Yep. Okay. All right, we only have, we have Alan here. Let's take a look at this. Okay, Alan is also doing the pendant, and very clean rendering here. Nice piece here, Alan.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Yeah. Oh, I think he just got here. Yeah, Alan's here. All right. Hey, man, if you got any questions, comment, feel free to toss them in the chat. We'll try to address those. Very little to do here, though.
I really like this piece. I think it's just like, it's just right. And you did a really good job with the other elements, like downplaying them and making them like desaturated, and there's a little bit of wear, a little bit of personality on things, but not too much. Like, it's really controlled.
I feel like this one in particular is like ready to be used in a game in this function. Right? It feels like it has that sort of look, it has the right kind of rendering, the right amount of polish to it, and it meets that sort of feeling that a game like this would be looking for. I'm going to assume that you had some good references to look at, because the subtlety of some of these golden tones and the warm shadow areas and some of the extra little colors you get in here, the way that it's highlighting, it's very accurate, it's very nice, and the attention to the rendering on this is coming through. So that is very good to see. If we were to make any adjustments in order to improve it, does anything come to mind?
Well, I think maybe even a little bit more color on the locket wouldn't hurt. It's very well rendered, but maybe just a little bit more color to bring it forward a little bit more from the rest of the items.
I mean, saturation-wise? Yeah, I can see that. You had a comment here. I had trouble suggesting the chain. I went for more impression rather than going into each one. I'll tell you what, Alan, that's what everybody does.
Chains are a pain.
Yeah, you use a chain brush, and then you go around and you hit little highlights and shadows in various places.
You just hit a few spots and hope for the best.
And honestly, that's pretty much what's accepted like 95% of the time. Unless you have like a feature chain right in front of the image, and
in that case, you might want to ask Nino because he knows how to do this really well. He's the expert.
You can do like a 3D chain and figure that out if you want to do that way. I have drawn some chain links by hand, but it's kind of cumbersome to work that out. It's not as simple as you think it would be, which is why people do it this way. It's one of those things you don't even notice, really think about as you're looking at the image. So I wouldn't fret about that. Okay. One thing I would suggest is actually maximizing the canvas area in here and making the guy a little bigger. We do have a decent amount of room that we could scale him up 20%. And because he's like the only face in the image, that could, make a little more use of the area.
That's a good point.
So, small change there. The other thing is what you mentioned earlier. Overall, just boosting the color a little bit. I just did like a little saturation pass to it.
That works.
So I don't think you really want to push beyond.
No, it doesn't.
Kind of that level.
That's enough for it. It doesn't. It's not a super colorful scene anyway. So yeah, that works.
You did good picking out the tones of these other elements, and the rendering looks good on them. You could maybe add a couple little scuffs on the wood just to give it a little texture, but that would be optional. It works well as is. Yeah. Good stuff, Alan. You've obviously been doing some practicing, or at least you threw in a lot of extra time into this one. Yeah, nice little scene.
Yeah, really well done. We only have 2 left.
Yeah, we have Anastasia and Elijah. And Elijah needed to go last, so I'm going to take a look at Anastasia. Now, you sent in 2 because I don't think you got to send in the sketch. So I'm going to take a look at the sketch that you also sent in with it. And oh yeah, okay, no, you did send these in. That's right.
Yeah,
right.
We saw those.
Right. All right, so those, and then you were working out your compositions and decided to change up the complexity of the scene, choosing to go with option 2 for your scene.
Yeah, I like that. That was a good choice.
So, really nice piece here.
Yes.
Very realistic, and I think it really mimics the look that would work well for a game like this.
It looks legit.
Yeah.
It's like in-game ready.
Yes.
Now, we know you made a 3D model, but for something this complex, I mean, obviously, it would be much more difficult to work out all of that mentally in 2D. So, like we mentioned in class, and maybe you mentioned on the stream, there are, obviously, if you have 3D skills, you can use those in the making of 2D art. It can be extremely helpful.
Yeah, some things are just difficult to freehand, and symmetrical things that are curvy at an angle is one of those things. If you've ever tried to do like curvy horns on a character from imagination at an angle and getting those curves to be correct on both directions, it's just mind-bending trying to work that out. So this is really nice. I particularly like a few of these subtle extras, like having this lady's portrait back here and having that bend of the paper right across her eyes. it's a subtle touch, but it really hits the right note.
That is just, it's just smart.
Yeah. And this idea, like, is this what the locket is that the key
Again,
goes to?
really smart. Like this is like 4D next level thinking.
Yeah.
You're not only doing your prop, you're tying it in with other things, but even the things you put in there, it's like really subtle. You might totally miss these little things, right? You didn't make them like big, glaring, obvious, colorful, contrasty. It's all like really dulled down. It's like a secondary read, right? The focus is your key. You see the focal point. It's really cool and interesting and ornate. And then you're kind of tying it with other things in the background that are much more subtle. Like you might not even notice them at first glance, and then when you actually really start to look at this, it's like you reward the viewer for looking at it for 5 seconds and thinking about it. Really smart next level thinking.
You know, you're really kind of outlining a story here that is not specific enough that it would break any kind of mechanic in the game, right? That the project might have, but it's something like somehow this locket was this lady's, and maybe it can be found at this X, and people are making notes, the classic strings to the thumbtacks thing. I want to talk through some of this because it's helpful to other people as well, to see how she is kind of implementing multiple levels of ideas while not compromising what the scene is about.
And they're not conflicting ideas.
Yes.
Or random ideas, right?
Quick answer to your question that you just put in. Yes, this video is automatically recorded and will be posted on the channel whenever YouTube finishes processing it, which is like half an hour or something.
But now they put it under the live tab.
Yes.
Right? So when you go to the channel, it's not under videos anymore. You have to click on the live tab to see these. I don't know why it just goes there.
I kind of wish it would go under videos as well, but all right, so if we were to make some changes to this, the other thing I do want to point out is this little texturing of kind of the ribbed pattern on this is nice.
Well, it's not just that, it's making a maze, you see, that leads to something, and the maze and the Cthulhu mythos is kind of tied. It just, there's a lot going on here that's really, really good.
It's nice other than just like the perfect cylindrical forms and stuff. Okay. Just a small value lighting thing that I would consider adjusting, which is if I squint, the values of the paper and the wall are really similar. I think that you could perhaps separate them out just a little bit so that the paper and the wall have a little more change between them. The wall, I think, could go a little darker with the paper coming off. And we are indicating the liquid, but that's another one where it is kind of an interesting element, but it's almost getting too dark to really appreciate. So just popping a little more luminosity.
Grab some of that in there.
Yeah.
Like some of that saturated red.
So here, I don't think you want to go crazy with it, right? Maybe something like that is good. I mean, you can punch it way up, but I feel like maybe that's getting too much. I think just a moderate push there would be nice. And then, oh yeah, I changed it on this one. So this is just a quick overall value change, bringing the paper up a little bit and bringing the wall down a little bit. And from a thumbnail view, it just helps the scene read slightly better. But the key is still distinctly the darkest, sharpest thing in the image, so we don't lose the focus on that. There was also, I think, a part of a layer got cut off right at the bottom.
Yeah, that's what she's saying it right there. I don't know where the chunk of the key went.
Yeah, I noticed, I was like, oh, I think you just did a selection and it selected that part by accident.
That happens to all of that.
I would just put something like that back in there. The attention to using the orange shadow for the blue light and the blue shadow for the warm light, high level thinking. I assume that that was helped by the use of the 3D working that out for you, in which case, good setting up the 3D to do that. Yeah. All right, well, that's what we got for you. Lovely piece. That's a nice one to show around. Honestly, guys, if you want to create these, like we said, the briefs are out there, and these look good in portfolios.
Yeah, this is really strong.
Yeah, this really shows that you can render materials, you can handle simple props, you can do a little visual storytelling. These are nice little additions that aren't a big time commitment like you see with like multi-character action scenes and epic stuff.
Yeah. If you guys are interested in more of these kind of smaller illustrations for challenges, like more props or more single items or more kind of limited scope challenges, let us know in the comments or on Discord, and we can come up with more of these, because I know Clint did a lot for a long time that were like quite large images. That were a lot of work and required a lot of time. I'm assuming, for most of you, these are less so and faster maybe to knock out. So if people out there want more of these, then we can create that.
Yeah, we'd love to do it if you guys are interested in this sort of topic, and we take suggestions. If you have suggestions for an art challenge that you would like us to run, toss it out there. Just leave it in the comment to the video. And I will read all of those comments, and if there's something that seems popular, we'll consider running it. So, okay, don't save. Everywhere else not done.
Christina said she would love more prop challenges like this. Well, if Christina says so, then obviously we have to.
That's what we need to do.
It's settled. We don't need to hear anymore.
All right, last one up we have is Elijah. Take a look at this. Now, Elijah was the only one that did the display jars. So for this, I mean, it's literally what he has right here. The goal was to do 3 display jars, and one of them is broken open and is missing its item, and the other 2 have these sort of oddity items in them. And he's decided to go with kind of a display case with these curtains drawn back, backlighted with this red light, and a cool kind of smoke feeling coming out of the main jar there. So overall, Elijah, I feel like this meets your vibe. We've got to meet, got a feel of that a little bit in class before, and this does seem like it's up your alley. So the read off the bat is very clear. I know what I'm looking at. So for me, I feel like the values are perhaps the biggest thing that could improve the piece. Yeah. Where if I kind of get back a little bit, it's getting very contrasty with like bright highlights and almost blacks. And the subjects themselves are getting a little lost in that high contrast. So, I don't know. We didn't really talk about these beforehand, so I'm curious what you were thinking.
No, I concur. First of all, there's just a lot going really right with it. Like, the design of this whole piece underneath here is really nice. The attention to scratches, all this is really nice. The way we're looking up at the jars are kind of ominous, right? Like, that's a nice touch. I see here you giving attention to like the edges of the glass, and the choice to backlight the jars is a good idea, right? It adds to that spooky feeling. So there's a lot going right with it, right? But yeah, I agree with Clint that we're getting quite kind of losing a little bit of the read, and we're getting really, really bright in the lights, and then just very, very dark kind of everywhere else.
Yeah, for this one, if I was tackling this, I would definitely look at having some references. I could only get so far with just guessing how to get this to look right. because there's a lot of complexity. You have like
It's
light
tricky. It's not
going
obvious.
through glass, going through another pane of glass from the back, and that's just not a setup that most people practice. So I did do a few things to it, and we can take a look at those edits. I'll just step through.
You look like Michael Shannon with this beard. A little bit, yeah.
Michael Shannon.
You don't know who it is. He's an actor.
Oh,
yeah.
Good-looking fellow, I take it.
Actor. Well, I guess, you know, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, etc.
Okay, so here we've got, this was me just going off kind of intuition. Oh no, I did have a few references. That's right, I do a few references in here. I did found those. These are all foggy glass, but I just thought they had a really cool effect with the light coming through the back of them. Photo by this person. And that was just a cool effect overall. If it was really that foggy, you wouldn't be able to make out what's in there very well. But I don't know, I saw it, so I put it on there. This is another piece that I've seen. It's a photo bashed piece, and I thought it had a really neat effect. So I did glance at this one, even though it's not one-to-one, because basically they put fog inside of this glass, and it's kind of like brightening up the fog. But that was interesting. So here I'm just trying to get a little more mid-tone, so the glass themselves kind of brighten up, then the background evens out a little bit in value. So the background's not getting quite as bright or quite as dark as it was, and these overall capturing a little bit more of that light, and it's just popping them up a little bit. Next is adding some of that highlight back in, that specular shine. And then what you can do on this, on the edges, if anybody tackles something like this in the future, is, I'm just using this as like a quick way to example something.
Hopefully it's not too laggy.
Yeah. So if you're going to do the broken edge of the glass, what you do is first is, I'm just using an angled brush myself, but you can draw the shape that you want. And this, I'm just showing you what I did. It's just a small little tip thing. And then I can grab the shape of that by Command or Control clicking on that layer. Now I can do Shift Control C to copy merged. And then I can paste that. That is pasted on there. It's just the shape of that. And then I can just paint into that. So if I want like a highlight, I can now just add the highlight, and it's only going to be in the shape of this, or if I want to put dark. And these broken edges of glass like this are quite irregular. Like, you can try to think through what part should be light or dark, but you're not going to be able to mimic nature. So you just want to be a little random with it, unless there's a point that you really need to show where that edge is at. Otherwise, you just kind of.
You can hit it a bit with that later, kind of desaturated.
Yeah, you can find kind of a median and just hit it overall and pop it up a little bit. So that's the sort of approach that I would use, just to get that sort of broken glass edge. That's what I did on this one. So, and that registers pretty well because the high contrast. And I was looking at possibly pushing that whole thing up a little bit. That edge. So no big changes, like we're not changing the composition or the subject matter, but maybe adjusting the values like this a little bit would give us a bit more read and a bit more focus on the displays themselves, where here we're actually getting the highest amount of kind of deep saturation is from the background. So it just
kind of draws your eye up into those little spots.
Okay. Otherwise, I feel like you could probably boost a little bit more light, maybe down here, because there's a lot of nice rendering here, but it's still pretty dark. Or possibly hitting a little more of this glass and letting it'd be clear that those kind of some of the glass shards, letting those be a little bit brighter. Yeah. All right.
I hope that was helpful, Elijah. Oh yeah, he commented.
Yeah. Yeah, that is all the entries, everybody. We appreciate you watching this along with us. Like I said, we can take Q&A for a couple of minutes if you guys have any questions.
Someone had a question up here, although I missed it. Which I don't know where it is now.
All right, give us a second. We're going to go back through the chat here and see if we can find where that earlier question was. Or if you want to repost the question.
There's a question.
Okay. How to appreciate artworks in daily basis techniques to enhance aesthetic taste as a 3D artist. Okay, that's getting a... All right, I'll have to read that again. How to appreciate artworks on a daily basis, technique-wise, to enhance the aesthetic taste as a 3D artist. I think I need you to re-ask that question. See if you can rephrase that question, because I'm not entirely sure what you're asking there. Okay. Yeah, sorry, I'm not trying to be obtuse. I'm just unclear exactly what you're asking.
I'm not sure I understand.
Will you do another art challenge in the coming months? Yeah, we probably will. We will likely run one probably between the next term. We just started the summer term classes, and we will probably run one between them and the fall term after the end. So we're looking at September would be likely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, July, August. Yeah, it'll probably be September when we run another one. And we have not yet decided on a subject matter. That's why we're taking suggestions. We have been talking about, though, continuing with Cluthulhu, but changing it, not doing another prop one, but maybe doing scenes or locations that would be in that fictional game.
Like maybe just interiors.
Mm-hmm.
If people are interested in that and they want to practice that.
Yeah.
So we already did the characters, we did clues, and now, I mean, that's the environments is kind of the last aspect of this project or fake game that we could explore, right? Unless we totally change the subject matter.
Yeah. Let's see. You mentioned in the challenge 6 months ago you were thinking of Python. I'm not sure what you mean by Python. Putting out some smaller rendering products. Is that still happening? Okay, if you're referring to the paint-alongs, yeah, I did put out a paint-along product on painting a stone breastplate.
It could be really just the stone material.
Yeah, it's the stone material. We just do it in the subject of a piece of armor. That is available in the store. You can go to swatchesacademy.com and pick that up if that's of interest. I will probably do more in the future. We're just busy with classes right now and currently making curriculum for new classes to be launched in the fall. So that's where time is going. I would love more prop challenges in the future, maybe props with a bit of world building. That's possible. Yeah. Otherwise, a sort of key moment with some storytelling as well. Yeah, it's possible that we could do some sort of scene or key moment within the story. Somebody confronts somebody falls out of a window. I mean, I don't know.
Someone just falls out of a window randomly.
Yeah.
You know, someone's hiding behind the curtain. You just see the feet sticking out from underneath, or there's a corpse behind the sofa. I don't know. Something like that. We could explore those types of things.
Would love some world building challenge. Maybe some challenges that talks more about the process, like ideation, world building, and maybe like a character and a small diorama. That could be fun. We haven't really done a character in a diorama sort of thing. I ever thought about making a tutorial on giving good feedback. I've taken tons of classes, and yours is some of the most helpful I've ever received. I have certainly not done anything on how to give good feedback. I'll just have to keep that in mind. That maybe just be a YouTube video where we could talk about the subject of giving feedback. But constructive feedback is needed, and if people don't know how to do it well, that would be good.
It would be good if they did know how to do it well.
Yes, that's what I mean.
Okay.
Do you plan to sell your brushes someday? I would love to purchase them. I'm afraid that my brushes are not that fancy.
They're just regular brushes.
I mean, I can show you like my brush lineup, and most of them are not very fancy. Like most of the time, I'm using hard round brush. Like that's what I use most of the time. My rounded medium brush actually gets quite a bit of use as well, which is just a big.
Sorry, Elijah.
How about I just paint on your piece here? It's this sort of shape, so it can give me a nice straight line, but it doesn't have super hard edges. I do have a brush that has completely hard edges, but not this one. It has a little color jitter in it, so you can get a little variation of color. That's one I use fairly often as well. I do have a bristle brush, a custom bristle brush that has a little color variation in it. If I want something a little more textury. I have a bunch of these other ones, but I honestly don't use them very often. Yeah. We use a couple of these, and we will be using a couple of these in the materials class to simplify some of the processes. Yeah. Some of the brushes I've just downloaded from other sites. I wouldn't be comfortable selling them because I didn't make them all. So yeah. Sorry for the unrelated question, but any chance of a one-on-one mentorship or counseling ever happening from either of you in the near future?
That's Raphael.
Raphael, it's unlikely that we're going to open up one-on-ones. I used to do that a lot before classes, but otherwise that's just takes up most of the time. Potentially, we may open a group mentorship class.
Like 6 people, maybe?
Yeah. That would be for advanced students who would be working on whatever projects they want to work on. We wouldn't be working through a curriculum. Primarily, we'd just be giving feedback and mentorship through the class, just talking through whatever the person is working on. That's something that we probably will do, but it would not be immediately. I mean, we're not going to launch that in the next couple of weeks.
No, that would probably be next year if that happens.
Yep. We have talked about doing some portfolio reviews. We'll probably do that in the next few months, I reckon.
Oh, yeah. I think we plan to do that.
In between terms, I believe.
In September.
Yeah, in September. We did this last year or early this year as well. And just doing portfolio reviews, limited number of spots. We only have so much time. And it'd probably be like 15 or so. And you could buy registration for that. You give us your portfolio, submit in whatever questions you might have, and we record the feedback, so it wouldn't be one-on-one live. Everybody would get a paint over where we talk about strengths and weaknesses in the portfolio, and also give any suggestions or advice that may be relevant to career or portfolio building, that sort of thing.
When we did that, I think it was in January. Was it in January?
January, February, something like that.
And people seem to really like those.
Yeah, we sold out of spots on that, but we'll probably do that again in September. And there may be a point at which we say, okay, for 1 week we'll do some one-on-one consultations, but we've not said that.
Okay. hang on, we missed something here. Sorry, guys. I appreciate 5 artworks on ArtStation. Do margin notes, sign points I like and dislike. I believe doing this can be helpful as a 3D artist. Oh, so like analyzing artwork that you like. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. We even tell some of our illustration students to do that. Like, okay, who are your favorite artists? Pick out the works that you like, and now make notes about why you like them. Like, what things about them do you like? And then whatever those notes are, you can, try to look at those notes, look at those points, and bring them into your own work. And if you're not able to do that, at least you know which things you need to work on or practice in order to kind of match the artworks that you really like.
Yeah.
Right?
Now, it's one thing to say, I like this piece, but then you need to get more specific and say, what is it specifically, like visually, that makes me like it? Is it the colors? Is it the shapes? Is it the design? Is it the expression of the character? And really go point by point and try to be as specific as possible. Because if you can isolate what that visual aspect is, then you can replicate it. You can utilize that information. But if it remains just a vague feeling, then you can't utilize that.
Having 2,500 brushes just in case, only using the same time. Oh yeah, like, well, Marion was in a class with us, but you didn't see my brush menu, and it's like way worse than Clint's. Like, I have 100 brushes for trees and rocks and things that I'll look at once in a while and maybe use one, but usually I only use the same like 2 or 3 brushes.
Yeah. I did the video about layers, how to use them. Hey, I'm glad you found that useful. Yeah, if you guys haven't checked it out, there's a video I did a while back on blending modes and layers and which ones you actually use the most in digital painting and what the differences are and kind of how to utilize each one. Yeah, it's just a helpful little, 10-minute video, somewhere around there.
Alan says, do you work with 3D to 2D in your own process? I have always been 2D everything, but seeing efficiency of 3D should jump into it. Seems like there isn't much art there that is truly 2D anymore. Well, I mean, there's still a lot that's just 2D. It just depends on the artist, right? So people like Victor Adame, right? As far as I understand it, is all 2D. Like, he makes little models, but they're physical models, and he lights them, like clay models, which is, I mean, it's kind of the same thing, right, in a roundabout way. But we don't, like, we use it very minimally because we don't really know 3D. Like, we are not modelers, and also our computers like just can't run Blender very well, so it's kind of, it can't really do very much. Like, the maximum I can do is possibly put a dall into Blender and maybe assign some just of like the Blender materials to it, and that's it. Like, I can't put clothes on it, I can't put textures on it, anything like that, because my computer will just like go to sleep.
Yeah, I tried to do that on a piece a while back, and as soon as I got like 5 models in, it was just dying, because I don't use like this powerful workstation. It's just a Mac Mini. It has fairly good stats, but yeah, it's not made for that.
Mine is not. Mine's worse than his.
I'd say that like 98% of my stuff is probably all 2D.
Yeah.
No, I will reference stuff like on Sketchfab. So if you want to say that's 3D, I'm just referencing something that I couldn't readily get a model of in the angle that is helpful. So in that way, I guess I use it, but I'm not downloading the model, manipulating it, lighting it.
We're just like looking at them on Sketchfab and positioning them like within the Sketchfab app, right? So that's pretty much all we really do with that. And then the odd weird looking dall occasionally, like if we need an unusual angle on a figure.
Yeah.
But even those, I mean, they're so stiff and,
If it's a pose that neither one of us could hold in order to photograph, then we'll try to go get a Daz
Yeah,
doll.
we can't
Yeah.
fly, so if it's a character that is flying, kind of have to do that. But that's pretty much it. We use it minimally. I'm trying to move this thing and it just like won't move. It won't go up. Oh, okay. Oh, the same brushes. Honestly, like there's nothing special about the brushes, but
I mean, you could take all my brushes away and just give me the round brush, and I can still do the same work. Yeah.
what size canvas do you usually use?
I really go above 3,000 pixels on the longer side. I feel like that's probably not sufficient. Otherwise, you're going to be working with like 1 and 2 pixel brushes to do a lot of the finer painting. I'd say that for a proper image, not just like some simple little sketch, but like, you know, in this scene that Elijah's doing here, you know, I'm going to set that at least 5,000. 4,000. I usually do my sketches at about 3 or 4,000 just to keep this file size down, and then I just sketch on it. But once I decide on my direction, you know, I'm going to jump up to at least 6,000, 5,000, because for a client, I don't always know how they're going to utilize that image. And sometimes, like for Wizards of the Coast, they may want to print that image on a 8-foot banner for some event. I don't know what they're going to do with it. So it has to be made at a resolution that it could hold up okay at that kind of use, which means, you know, 3,000 isn't going to be sufficient. It may also be determined by your computer stats.
Yeah.
That might be what your computer is capable of doing.
Daz is a daunting program. I still don't fully know how to use Daz Studio. Like, we literally just grab the doll, pose it, and then bring it into Blender to light it because we don't know how to light it in Daz.
I feel
or at
like
least I don't. I don't.
Daz is odd, man. It's like it has this really. It feels like 1990s interface.
Yeah.
It has a very aged sort of interface. It doesn't feel very intuitive. And like it hasn't really changed. They keep updating all of the models and like, oh, Genesis 9 now, but the interface is still kind of clunky.
I know, like I've seen images, I guess, of people setting up like entire scenes in Daz. I do not know how to do this.
No,
If anyone has a tutorial that actually explains how to do this, I would watch it because even the Daz tutorials are mega confusing to me that I found on YouTube. So if anyone knows of a good one, you know, send it over.
I'm with you. Like
we're still trying to figure this out.
I've seen these people like, oh, I got this whole castle background and I put my dragon up here and I did a couple of figures down here and then I had this epic lighting on it. It's like, what, you did that in Daz? What? I don't know. Let's see. Things. By the way, I saw your art in the Hearthstone card game, the Claw Bear one. Super cool. Oh, thank you. Yeah. I did one Hearthstone card while I was there. I oversaw the creation of a bunch, but I did one personal one myself. Yeah. Lightning controls would be useful. Yeah. Interface is clunky. Yeah. All right, guys. That is all the questions that I see. So going forwards, if you want to jump in some challenges, go over any of the last 50 art challenge briefs and want to give those a go, like we said, go over to the Swatches Discord channel server, and there is the art challenge room. There's information in there where you can go find all of those. They're on, I think they're on Dropbox. You can go down there and peruse those. Otherwise, feel free to be part of the community out there on Discord, and you can go over to swatchesacademy.com. At the bottom of all the pages is an email sign up. You can sign up there. We'll let you know whenever we're coming out with a new term of classes, or if we're doing portfolio reviews or something like
challenges. That. Like all the new stuff, basically, we send out a notification, but we don't spam or anything.
We don't spam. When there's actually something going on, we'll let you know about it. Otherwise, you're not going to hear from us. It's kind of the way that works. All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us.